Their emotions keep becoming stronger. Their silence grows heavier with every passing day. The weight they carry inside continues to increase until they finally reach a moment where they can no longer hide from the truth. Sooner or later, they will have to decide. They can finally speak the feelings they have buried for so long, or they can continue carrying them alone in silence. Stay with me, because what you are about to discover may explain why this person felt such an intense connection with you, why they have never truly been able to let go, and why the words they may one day say could come from a place far deeper than you ever imagined. If this message already feels surprisingly personal, there may be a reason for that. Perhaps a part of you has sensed this connection for a long time. Maybe something deep inside has always whispered that there was more happening beneath the surface than anyone could see. The truth behind this kind of bond is not simple. It is not ordinary. It is not the type of experience people easily leave behind. Think about this for a moment. What if the person who cannot stop thinking about you is not confused by their emotions? What if they are struggling because they understand those emotions all too clearly? What if they have spent months or even years trying to escape a truth they already know? What if your presence changed something inside them so deeply that distance could not erase it, silence could not bury it, and distractions could never replace it? That possibility changes everything. And what comes next may answer questions you have carried much longer than you realize. The deepest emotional connections are often the ones people resist the most. Instead of accepting what they feel, they spend endless energy trying to fight it. They convince themselves the feelings are temporary. They promise themselves that enough time will make everything disappear. They believe walking away will make life easier. Yet some connections refuse to fade simply because someone decides to ignore them. They remain quietly alive beneath the surface, growing stronger while pretending to be forgotten. Many people believe love appears only because of timing, attraction, chemistry, or coincidence. They think relationships are built only through circumstances and chance encounters. But real human emotions often reveal something much deeper. Sometimes a person enters your life and leaves a mark that logic cannot fully explain. Their presence feels strangely familiar before you even understand why. Their words echo in your thoughts long after the conversation ends. Their energy brings a sense of peace that is difficult to describe. Even their silence seems to speak louder than the voices of everyone else. Keep listening, because this next idea may completely change the way you see your own story. The strongest emotional experiences are rarely the loudest. Very often they grow quietly, unnoticed at first, until one day they become impossible to ignore. That is when people realize they were never simply remembering someone. They were carrying a connection that had quietly become part of who they are. When someone feels deeply connected to another person beyond simple attraction, it is often because something inside them recognizes something meaningful. The heart notices what the mind cannot yet explain. It senses importance before logic has enough evidence to understand it. This remains one of the greatest mysteries of human relationships. Why does one person become unforgettable while thousands of others slowly fade from memory? Why does one familiar voice continue returning to your thoughts? Why does one person's presence feel comforting even when no words are spoken? Why do old memories suddenly return after you believed you had already moved on? Why does someone's absence create an emptiness that feels larger than the presence of many other people combined? The answers often exist much deeper than what appears on the surface. Every person carries hidden places inside themselves. There are silent hopes, private fears, unanswered questions, forgotten dreams, and parts of their personality that are still waiting to be discovered. Throughout life, people naturally feel drawn toward those who reflect something meaningful that already exists within them. Sometimes another person becomes like a mirror, revealing qualities, emotions, and possibilities that were always there but had never been fully seen. Stay with me, because understanding this hidden process may completely change the way you view the people who have entered your life and the reasons some of them never truly leave your heart. This is why certain connections feel powerful from the very first moment. It is not because the other person is flawless. No one is. It is because their presence awakens something that has been sleeping inside us for a long time. They remind us of emotions we forgot we could still feel. They uncover parts of ourselves we stopped noticing years ago. They quietly invite us to look at areas of life we had ignored or pushed aside. This person was not drawn to you simply because being around you felt comfortable or convenient. They were drawn to you because your presence reached them in a way they could never fully explain. Without even trying, you touched places inside them that had remained hidden for years. You brought old emotions back to the surface. You awakened feelings they believed were already under control. The emotional walls they had carefully built started to crack. The protection they depended on no longer felt as strong as before. Remaining distant became more difficult because something deep inside them had already shifted. That is what separates rare connections from ordinary experiences. Many people can attract attention. Many can create short-lived excitement. Many leave behind pleasant memories that slowly disappear. But only a few people inspire real inner change without even realizing they are doing it. Stay with me, because the next part explains why some people become unforgettable while others quietly fade away. You became a reflection for this person. You became a mirror that revealed the parts of themselves they had spent years avoiding. A mirror does not create something new. It simply shows what has always been there. When they looked at you, they were not only seeing who they were in that moment, they were also catching a glimpse of the person they could become. Your kindness reminded them of the loneliness they had been hiding. Your confidence exposed the places where they still doubted themselves. Your honesty challenged the emotional masks they had worn for so long. Your presence showed them that life, love, and closeness could be experienced in a completely different way. That is one reason letting go of you has never been easy. People often forget temporary excitement. They forget ordinary conversations. They forget moments that carried no lasting meaning, but they rarely forget an experience that awakens something deep inside the heart. A connection like this is not only about feeling happy, it is about personal growth. It is about change. It is about being quietly challenged to become someone stronger and more complete. Human nature naturally moves toward experiences that transform us, even when transformation feels uncomfortable, even when growth creates uncertainty, and even when change asks us to leave behind everything familiar. Keep watching, because this hidden truth explains more than most people ever realize. What makes this story even more meaningful is that you may never fully understand the impact you had on this person's life. Often, the people who change us the most have no idea how deeply they influenced us. They are not trying to become unforgettable. They are simply living honestly. They continue moving through life while carrying their own struggles without placing that weight on everyone else. They experience disappointment without allowing it to harden their hearts. They keep moving forward after painful seasons. They continue showing kindness even when life gives them every reason to become distant or cold. In a world where many people hide behind appearances and carefully built images, true authenticity becomes something incredibly rare. And that is exactly what this person recognized when they looked at you. They did not see perfection. They saw something much more valuable. They saw someone who felt genuine. Perhaps this is where the real story actually begins. Not with attraction, not with perfect timing, not because of a lucky coincidence. It begins with recognition, a quiet understanding that two lives crossed paths for a meaningful reason, and after that meeting, neither person could ever return to being exactly who they were before. Recognition rarely arrives with dramatic speeches or unforgettable moments. More often, it begins as a quiet feeling that simply refuses to disappear. They may have tried to explain those emotions away. They may have convinced themselves it was only a passing feeling. They may have believed that enough time would slowly erase everything. But some emotions do not disappear simply because someone chooses to ignore them. That is exactly what has been happening inside this person for a long time. They believed they could continue living without facing what they truly felt. They thought distance would make life easier. They hoped silence would finally bring peace. They convinced themselves that avoiding the connection would eventually remove its importance. Instead, the opposite happened. The farther they tried to walk away, the more they became aware of everything they were leaving behind. Every distraction worked only for a little while before their thoughts quietly returned to you again. Every new experience was compared, even without realizing it, to the moments they once shared with you. Every new person reminded them, in some small way, of the connection they had never fully released. This is what happens when someone leaves a lasting mark on another person's heart. A meaningful connection is not measured only by conversations, messages, meetings, or physical closeness. Sometimes the strongest bond continues growing during silence. It is measured by how deeply two people change one another. Some people enter our lives and leave almost no trace. Others arrive and quietly transform the way we think, the way we understand ourselves, and the way we experience love, trust, and emotional closeness. That is why your presence has continued living inside them. Whether they ever admitted it or not, meeting you changed something important. You reshaped the way they viewed relationships. You helped them see vulnerability differently. You revealed a new way of experiencing trust, connection, and genuine emotional closeness. And what happens next may be the part they can no longer keep hidden. Some of life's greatest lessons do not come through success or personal victories. They arrive through experiences that test us. They come through moments that push us to look deeper within ourselves than we ever expected. And sometimes those lessons arrive through another person. You became one of those unforgettable lessons in their journey. Not because you tried to change them, not because you gave long speeches or forced them to see things differently. You changed them simply by being yourself. The way you treated them quietly opened doors they thought had been closed forever. You reminded them that genuine kindness still exists in the world. You showed them that honesty still has value. You helped them realize that real strength is not always loud or demanding. Sometimes the strongest people are the quiet ones, the patient ones, the people who choose compassion over pride and continue being authentic even when no one is watching. Those qualities leave a lasting impression that time cannot easily erase. Many people can create excitement that lasts only for a little while. Many can bring temporary happiness or attraction, but very few inspire lasting respect that grows stronger with time. Even fewer encourage another person to become a better version of themselves. That is what made this connection different from all the rest. Stay with me, because what comes next may explain why this bond refused to disappear, even after everything seemed to pull you apart. This connection was never only about romance. It was never simply about two people sharing emotions. It was about growth. It was about two lives crossing paths at exactly the moment when something deep inside one person was ready to wake up. Real growth is rarely comfortable. It asks people to face the parts of themselves they would rather avoid. It asks them to let go of old fears that once felt safe. It invites them to question beliefs they carried for years without ever challenging them. It asks them to stop hiding behind excuses that once made them feel protected. That process is not easy. In fact, it often feels uncomfortable. Many people mistake that discomfort as proof they should walk away. They believe that if something feels difficult, then it must be wrong. But very often, discomfort is the first sign that real change has already begun. This person felt that inner conflict every time you crossed their mind. One side of them wanted to protect the life they already understood. They wanted everything to remain familiar and predictable. They wanted to avoid the uncertainty that comes with opening their heart. But another part of them quietly understood something else. That part knew they could no longer stay the same forever. Slowly, that inner battle became impossible to ignore. Keep listening, because this is where everything starts to shift. As time passed, they began noticing how often thoughts of you appeared during ordinary moments. They remembered conversations that once seemed completely normal. They remembered how peaceful they felt in your presence. They remembered little details they never imagined would matter. A certain smile, a familiar expression, a quiet moment that somehow stayed alive long after everything else faded. Those memories remained because they were connected to genuine emotion. The human mind naturally holds on to experiences that carry deep meaning. That is why some memories remain bright even after countless others disappear. Without realizing it, you became one of those unforgettable memories that quietly shaped their life. Eventually, another truth became impossible to deny. Running away never created peace. Ignoring their emotions never brought freedom. Pretending not to care never changed what they actually felt inside. The emotions remained. The unanswered questions remained. And the connection remained. Every person eventually reaches a moment when avoiding the truth becomes more exhausting than accepting it. Perhaps they are approaching that moment now. Maybe they are beginning to understand that courage does not mean living without fear. Courage means choosing honesty even while fear is still present. That realization changes everything. Instead of asking themselves how to escape these feelings, they begin asking why those feelings appeared in the first place. Instead of wondering how to forget you, they begin wondering why forgetting you has always seemed impossible. This is often the point where real transformation begins. The strongest relationships are not built because two people never feel afraid. Fear is a natural part of caring deeply about someone. The strongest bonds are created when honesty becomes more important than comfort. That decision rarely happens overnight. It grows quietly through reflection. It grows through difficult questions. It grows during lonely moments when a person finally becomes honest with themselves. Then one day, silence begins to feel heavier than speaking the truth. When that moment arrives, something inside starts to change. The words they once struggled to say become easier to express. The emotions they kept locked away slowly rise to the surface. The walls they built to protect themselves begin losing their purpose. That is why this connection never truly disappeared. Through silence, distance, uncertainty, and time, something continued living beneath everything that could be seen. It kept shaping both of your lives in quiet ways that neither of you may have fully understood. And perhaps you changed because of them as well. Maybe this experience taught you patience. Maybe it strengthened you in ways you never noticed. Maybe it helped you understand your own heart more clearly. Maybe it showed you the kind of connection that brings peace instead of confusion. Real connections rarely transform only one person. When two lives genuinely touch each other, both people carry something forward. Even if distance separates them for a season, the lessons remain, the memories remain, the growth remains. That is what gives certain connections lasting power. They remind us that love is not only about emotions, it is also about becoming wiser, more honest, more compassionate, and brave enough to face what lives inside our hearts. In the end, what this person feels goes far beyond simple attraction. It is gratitude for the way you changed something within them. It is respect for the person you have always been. It is quiet admiration for the strength you showed without asking for recognition. Most of all, it is the realization that meeting you became one of the defining moments of their life. Whether they speak those feelings tomorrow, months from now, or years later, the truth inside them continues to grow. Some truths become stronger the longer they are ignored. Some emotions become clearer with time instead of fading away. And some people remain unforgettable because they awaken something within us that had been waiting all along to be discovered. If this connection has survived silence, distance, uncertainty, and the passing of time, perhaps it has been growing in ways neither of you could fully see until now. If this connection has survived silence, distance, uncertainty, and unanswered questions, maybe it was never meant to disappear quickly. Maybe it stayed because it had something important to reveal. Perhaps it was meant to uncover hidden strength. Perhaps it was meant to teach patience that neither of you knew you needed. Perhaps it existed to remind both people that real connections are rare and should never be taken for granted. Life has an unusual way of bringing certain people into our lives at exactly the right moment. Often we do not understand why at first. Sometimes the meaning only becomes clear after months or even years have passed. Looking back, many people discover that the moments they once believed were ordinary were actually turning points. The conversations they almost ignored, the people they almost walked away from, the experiences they thought meant very little at the time. Those are often the moments that quietly shape the person they later become. Maybe that is the deeper meaning behind this entire story. It was never only about someone developing feelings. It was never only about attraction or perfect timing. It was about two lives crossing paths and leaving a permanent mark on each other. And sometimes that becomes the deepest confession a person can ever make. Not simply saying they care, not simply admitting they miss someone, but realizing that because of another person, they became someone they never imagined they could be. Stay with me, because the next part explains why some people never truly disappear from our hearts. That kind of connection is incredibly rare. That kind of transformation cannot be forced. It cannot be created through pressure, expectations, or endless effort. It happens naturally when two people awaken something meaningful inside each other. That is why certain people never truly leave our hearts. They remain as reminders of the moments when we finally felt understood. They remind us of the times when someone noticed parts of us that everyone else overlooked. They remind us that the deepest connections are not always the loudest ones. In fact, the most powerful bonds are often the quietest. They grow slowly. They change us without making a sound. They gently help us become stronger, wiser, and more open to the future waiting ahead. Their silence was not always proof that they felt nothing. The distance they created was not always a sign that they stopped caring. Sometimes silence is born from confusion. Sometimes distance comes from fear. Sometimes people step away not because the connection means too little, but because it means far more than they know how to handle. This person found themselves trapped between two powerful emotions. One side wanted safety. The other side could no longer ignore what continued growing inside. They wanted to protect themselves, but deep down they also knew they could not spend their entire life running from something that felt real. Keep listening, because what happened next explains why this connection refused to fade. Every time they tried to ignore their feelings, those emotions became stronger instead of weaker. Every time they convinced themselves they had finally moved on, something unexpectedly reminded them of you. It could have been a familiar place, a meaningful song, a quiet memory, even a simple moment during an ordinary day. Somehow, you always return to their thoughts. That happens because certain connections cannot simply be erased by a decision to forget. Some experiences remain with us until we fully understand why they entered our lives. Some people stay in our hearts because they awaken parts of ourselves that had been sleeping for years. Until those emotions are honestly faced, the lesson remains unfinished. Maybe this is where the real story truly begins. It was never only about attraction. It was never only about luck or timing. It started with recognition. It started with the quiet realization that some people enter our lives and forever change the way we see the world. They challenge old beliefs. They uncover hidden parts of ourselves. They encourage us to experience emotions we once avoided. After a discovery like that, life rarely returns to exactly the way it was before. Think about that for a moment, because this next truth may explain everything you have been wondering about. The distance between two people is not always created by a lack of feelings. Sometimes it happens because those feelings become too deep to understand. Many people know how to handle simple attraction because attraction stays on the surface. It feels exciting. It feels safe. It asks very little from us, but true emotional vulnerability is completely different. It asks someone to lower the walls they spent years building around their heart. It asks them to allow another person to see what exists beneath the image they present to the world. Many people become experts at appearing confident. They learn how to make others smile. They learn how to seem successful, strong, and untouched by pain. They become comfortable showing only the parts of themselves that feel safe. But allowing someone to see the hidden places inside is much harder. It means accepting the possibility of being hurt. It means revealing fears, weaknesses, and old wounds that have remained protected for years. It means trusting someone with the most fragile parts of yourself. That is exactly where fear begins. At some point, this person realized that you were seeing far beyond the version of themselves they showed everyone else. You did not only notice their confidence, you noticed what existed behind it. You saw the loneliness they rarely admitted. You recognized the sadness hidden behind their smile. You sensed the exhaustion they covered with quiet strength. While everyone else only saw what they chose to reveal, you somehow noticed what they worked so hard to hide. That realization changed them more than they expected. Most people spend years building emotional defenses to avoid rejection and disappointment. Over time, those walls become so familiar they forget they even exist. Then one day, someone quietly looks beyond every layer without forcing anything. Someone understands without endless explanations. Someone notices the emotions hidden behind ordinary words. You became that person for them. You looked beyond the image they carefully protected. You recognized feelings they almost never expressed. You noticed the silent battles behind their strongest moments. You understood pieces of them they never found the words to explain, and that is why this connection remained alive inside them. Because being truly seen is something the human heart almost never forgets.